Hi everybody, I'm Jessica. I'm the Certified Life Coach at Endless Possibilities Life Coaching Services. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about stress. So there's going to be a series that I'm going to be releasing on the YouTube channel that deals with stress. But I think fundamentally the most important point to start from when I work with clients is what is the biology behind stress? So stress is inevitable. It is something we are all going to experience throughout life. So as much as I've tried to find a skill set to remove stress, I've had no luck in that. So what I decided to do is really start looking at the components of stress, identifying what it is so we can come to have awareness and acceptance about that. And then moving forward, what can we do to master the negative effects of stress and even capitalize on some of the more positive aspects of stress? So in today's series, I'm going to be laying down the foundation of the biology behind stress. So stress is fundamentally a very primal physical response. And when we are activated with this primal kind of trigger in life, we have very specific things that happen within our body. So first, we have two hormones that are released at the effect of stress. One is adrenaline, the second is cortisol. So each of the hormones are released at about the same time, but their purposes and functions within the body are very specific. So for adrenaline, we have an increase in our heart rate and our blood pressure. With the release of adrenaline within our body, there's an air passage. Our airways actually expand to get ready for our epic response to stress. Also, we have blood that moves to the muscles so that our muscles are primed and ready to run or to fight. So remember, stress is that fight or flight response. It is the thing that alerts your body, hey, we have an immediate physical threat and we have to react. We have to react in a very massive, very epic proportion. So that's the fundamental kind of premise to why these hormones get released and how stress is activated. So as I'm outlining the effects that adrenaline has, that's the reference to keep in mind. That increase in our heart rate and our blood pressure is so that we're pumping more fluid through our body, more of the juice that makes us move so that we can activate, we can respond. The air passages expanding in our lungs means that we're primed, we're ready to make a bigger, bolder response. And then the blood moving to our muscles, as I had said, activates our extremities to be able to run or to fight or to do whatever we need to do. And then our body, the adrenaline also regulates and alters the metabolism within our body so that we don't have a super crash. We don't, the exertion of our effort isn't impacted by our metabolic system because the adrenaline comes in and tells the metabolic system, hey, we're about to do something here. We need you to behave in this certain way. And then in addition to the adrenaline being released, cortisol is actually also released. And the cortisol has a response that sort of adds a buffering and a support to the adrenaline. So the adrenaline is like the big bang, and then cortisol comes in and softens the blow. So with cortisol, it comes in and it helps to buffer the big blow, the big bang of the adrenaline. So one of the things it does is it helps control our blood sugar. So just like the metabolism was altered by the adrenaline, that cortisol comes in and tells the body and the metabolism, hey, we're not going to have a crash here. We're not going to have any kind of derogatory response to this, so we're going to level out and regulate that blood sugar for you. It also helps to regulate our metabolism. So the adrenaline says, hey, metabolism, get on alert, you're activated, and then cortisol comes in to say, okay, this is how we're going to manage this. So that again, you've got that stability, that energy component stability, so that although you're exerting a lot, you don't have that major crash that would put you at risk or danger in the fight or flight response. It also, cortisol reduces inflammation, which I found interesting on the biological level, but if we have a reduction of inflammation that is coursing, the cortisol coursing through our body, then that means one, we're more able to withstand physical exertion, and two, there is that physical buffer when our adrenaline is heightened and where our fight or flight is activated. And then from a psychological standpoint, the thing I found most interesting was that cortisol actually increases memory formulation. So what that means is that as we are dealing with and biologically responding to that stress response, we have hormones, we have cortisol that's coming in and actually etching that memory more firmly with more detail and more precision into our brain. And if you think about this, this is again from the premise that this is a very primal response. You know, back in the beginning times of mankind, of human beings, we had a much more physical world. Not that there weren't stressors that came in an emotional and mental way for human beings back then, but survival was really a very physical feat. It was something that they had to do and participate in a very active way every day. And that was very different from what most of us experience now. So a lot of their stressors had a very physical response and a very physical danger. So there was a real need to remember what you did right or well and self-preservance and what didn't happen so well and what things were more dangerous to you. So in many respects, it made sense to me that that was a component of our fight or flight response, was that we had some extra buffer into memory so that we had some self-preservation mechanisms. However, the challenge is that this is not our typical stressor now. Typically, we are not able to have a very physical response in our stress because our stress is not physical. Our stress is much more mental. It is much more emotional, and it is much more about the things that are unseen or the deadlines ahead. I mean, stuff that isn't a very physical, active, in our moment threat. So with that being said, the things that are getting burned into memory are things that don't benefit us to have a memory recollection from. They don't bring us the same value that I think they did based on the primal response that our body has to stress. Also, think about this. So the fact that our heart rate gets increased and our blood is flowing to our extremities and our air passages are expanded and all of these very physical responses are happening, if we are not actually responding to a physical stressor, we have no way to release that. And so we get a lot of pent up energy. We get an overexertion of our adrenaline. We have an overload of our cortisol, and our body has no way to release it because the built-in system of kind of letting that pressure valve out was actively responding to the stressor. So you were actively running for your life or actively fighting off the threat. And without that, now what I tell clients is you're like a teapot that can't let the steam out and you just bottle up with all this kind of energy, and it can turn into frustration, it can turn into anxiety, it can turn into all sorts of negative self-defeating kind of attributes. So what do you do with all of that? Well, we have another built-in biological system that does help balance out the fight or flight response and all that it brings with something a little calmer and more relaxing. Remember, our bodies are all about homeostasis. So it is about trying to maintain that balance, find the moderation between all of the extremes. And so we have systems that are built in to help us with that. So the parasympathetic nervous system is what I call the decompressor. It is that system that lets out the steam. It releases that valve so that we can let the stress go. Again, back in the kind of primal biological times, we would have had that built in with our response to a physical stress. And if we have a physical stress and we can have a physical response to it, it still works that way. But when we recognize that our stressors aren't typically physical and they're much more emotional and mental, this is where we run into problems. So as a coach, one of the things that I often work with clients about and teach in almost every fundamental level is how do we activate the parasympathetic nervous system? So much of that comes in the way of self-care. It comes in the way of finding your own wellness plan to releasing that pressure valve. So I'm going to do another video that talks just about the parasympathetic nervous system and what you can do to offer that release. I'll give some examples of what works well for me, but again, this is very specific and very tailored to each individual. But I will outline some specific components that are often useful for most everybody in a parasympathetic wellness plan. So I hope that you found this video informative, and I know working with a lot of clients, it has brought them a lot of relief to understand that, sometimes those anxious feelings, sometimes that, elephant on your chest, or the pressure that you can just never seem to find relief from is much more of a biological component. And it isn't anything that you're doing wrong. It isn't anything that you're creating out of thin air all on your own. It is the built up kind of residue of a very biological response that is happening whether you acknowledge it's there or not. And what I find most rewarding when working with clients on this is teaching them that aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system, that part that says, okay, so this is what it is, and you aren't able, because of the type of stress you have, to naturally kind of get that release. So here's the things that you can do, that you can take into your own hands, that you can build into your own daily routine, that you can have right there within your environment to make sure that the stress that you're bringing in and incurring has an equal or close to equal release on it, so that you can help your biology create that homeostasis, where I promise you it is working so hard to do. So again, I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to address them in the comment section. I also am available for sessions privately, within group sessions, and I'll be doing some workshops and different things like that, but you can always reach out to me too.